Click for IB Biology. In this video we're dealing with the cardiac cycle here, which is part of the transport section of the syllabus. In this video we'll be going through the sequence of events which take place on both the left and the right side of the heart during a single heartbeat. In the description there is a PDF of this presentation which you may care to download and annotate with your own notes, or indeed what I'm saying. But more importantly, for this particular video, there is a table called the cardiac cycle which breaks down each of the events into detail and records that in a form which I think will help you to study this in your own time. Within the description there's also a quick quiz that you might like to take to test your understanding after you have completed your study. As the name implies, cardiac cycle is a cyclic event, and therefore we have to decide when we're going to break into this cycle to describe what goes on during a heartbeat. I've chosen to begin with the heart in a complete state of diastole. In this condition, the heart previously has contracted and ejected blood in the pulmonary artery and in the aorta to the body's organs. With the heart relaxing, there is something of a backflow in the aorta and the pulmonary artery, and this causes a closure of the semi-lunar valves. With this closing of the valves, one can hear a noise in the heart when using a stethoscope, and this is referred to as the second heart sound. Now, in describing these heart sounds, the second heart sound is often described as dup, whereas the first heart sound is often called lup. So your heart goes lup dup as it beats. However, after the heart has relaxed, blood attempts to backflow from the arteries into the heart, and this causes the closure of the semi-lunar valves, sealing off the heart, preventing backflow, and gives us this sound called dup, which is the second heart sound actually. Fractions of a second later, blood is returning to the heart in the pulmonary veins from the lung and in the inferior and superior vena cava, and the atria are filling up with blood, passively filling up and extending. This is called atrial, atrial distension. So that just means that the atria are filling, and so the pressure is rising within the atria as the blood collects in the two atria returning from the heart. What's happening on the left hand side happens on the right hand side at the same time. Moments later, what happens is that the pressure in the atria becomes greater than the pressure in the ventricle. So pressure in the atria is greater than pressure in the ventricle, and the atrioventricular valves open both left and right, and the ventricles begin to fill with blood. Now notice that in the description so far, everything has happened during what is called diastole, which is when the heart is actually in a state of relaxation. And the events which are taking place are occurring in mere fractions of a second. Once the atria are full of blood, a contraction is initiated by the sinoatrial node, which causes both the right atrium and left atrium to contract simultaneously. And the effect of this is to add an additional volume of blood to the ventricle, or another way to express this is to say that the ventricle is actually stretched. So the ventricle is now filling up with blood. It's actually been stretched by the action of the contraction of the two atria. Then we enter what is called ventricular systole, which you'll recall happens because the stimulus to contract has traveled down the center of the heart and emerged into the heart tissue, into the heart muscles of the ventricles, and will cause these to contract. When this happens, back pressure into the atria, because the ventricle pressure is greater than the atrial pressure. So at that time, the atrioventricular valves close. And when they do so, they make a sound. And this is referred to as the first heart sound, or indeed LUP is the descriptive term. At this time, the heart is entirely closed off, and the contraction of the ventricle squeezes a trapped volume of blood within the heart, and the pressure rises radically. This is called isovolumetric contraction. Iso means same, volumetric, volume, and contraction. So the volume remains the same because the valves are all closed. There's no exit, there's no backflow, and the muscles contract and squeeze it, and the pressure rises radically. When the pressure in the ventricle is greater than the pressure in the arteries, the semi-lunar valves will open, so that these will open and blood will be ejected out in a pulse in the aorta and the pulmonary artery simultaneously, ejecting the blood out into the arteries. And that brings our cycle to an end as the heart then retreats into ventricular diastole and relaxes. The details of this cycle are quite complex, and I have set them out into a table so that you can follow them slowly at your leisure, perhaps following the video through one more time. These links take us to the next videos in the sequence of animal transport, and we also have links to the playlists within this channel and the possibility of a subscription. Thank you.